The ecosystem of professional sports media is a vast, predatory landscape, driven not by the biological imperative of survival, but by the relentless consumption of narrative. Within this environment, there are currents of information that flow with the indifference of a river, and there are distinct moments where the flow is disrupted by an anomaly. We currently stand in the midst of such a disruption, a period of observation concerning Caitlin Clark, the Women's National Basketball Association, and the machinery of sports journalism. It is a time to pay close attention to the mechanics of the industry. It is a time to verify one's connection to the source, to ensure that the subscription to the truth remains active. For in the digital jungle, audiences can be lost to the undergrowth of algorithms and fleeting controversies. There has been a recent contraction in the audience, a migration of viewers triggered by the discourse surrounding the Banna Stewart video. This attrition is a statistical reality. The audience reacts to friction. Some depart, driven by anger or disagreement. It is a natural culling, a shift in the demographic plate tectonics that content creators must accept with stoic resolve. No directive was issued for the actions that caused this rift, but the consequences are now part of the landscape. It is what it is. The focus, however, must remain on the primary subject, a story that has been developing in the periphery, involving the structural integrity of the WNBA and its franchises. The release of a league schedule is usually a procedural event, a dry dissemination of dates and coordinates. Yet the recent release of the WNBA schedule has become a diagnostic tool, revealing the health and the intentions of the league's operators. We are observing a peculiar phenomenon where the sports media apparatus has begun to broadcast a premature conclusion. They proclaim that other WNBA teams have looked at the data and decided that the Caitlin Clark effect has ceased to function. They argue that the phenomenon is a wrap, that the fever has broken, and that the desire of fans to fill the cavernous expanses of NBA arenas to witness her play has evaporated. This assertion, however, crumbles under forensic scrutiny. It is a narrative built on a fundamental misunderstanding of the current atmospheric conditions of the league. To understand the schedule, one must first understand the vacuum in which it was created. There is no collective bargaining agreement currently in place. The season is being mapped out on a terrain that is legally unstable. This absence of a CBA is the gravitational force warping the decisions of the schedule makers. It is the invisible hand guiding the pen. The media's attempt to downplay the popularity of Caitlin Clark is a transparent biological reflex. They are organisms seeking equilibrium, desperate to distribute the attention to other players, to diverse components of the ecosystem that simply do not possess the same kinetic energy. But the laws of physics are stubborn. The league is indeed moving more games to different arenas this upcoming season, 19 games in total, an increase from 15 the previous year. On the surface, this data point suggests growth. But when one dissects the numbers, the anatomy of the increase is revealed to be unrelated to the organic demand for Clark. The increase in venue changes is largely a byproduct of expansion. The Toronto Tempo, a new entity in the league's biological order, along with the Portland Fire, has altered the math. The Tempo are a nomadic force, scheduled to play 5 home games outside of their usual habitat, the Coca-Cola Coliseum. They are projecting their presence into Montreal and Vancouver, testing the waters of new territories. This is calculated expansionism, not a response to the singular gravity of the Indiana fever. When we isolate the variables associated with Caitlin Clark and the Indiana fever, a different pattern emerges. Opponents have moved just 4 games to bigger arenas for the Fever this season, a significant regression from the 9 games moved the previous year. These 4 distinct coordinates in time are July 5th against the Aces, August 8th against the Sky, August 18th against the Tempo, and August 20th against the Wings. A rigorous observer will note the positioning of these dates. They are clustered in the latter half of the calendar. This is not a coincidence, it is a survival strategy. The league's architects are operating in a fog of war regarding the CBA. There exists a distinct possibility, a parallel world, where the early months of the season are consumed by labor disputes, where the season is shortened or delayed. By placing the high-value assets, the games involving Clark in large arenas, later in the schedule, the league is attempting to insulate its most profitable events from the potential catastrophe of a lockout. The disparity is stark. The Chicago Sky and the Dallas Wings have each committed to just one venue change this year, a reduction from two the previous season. The Washington Mystics, the Connecticut Sun, and the Atlanta Dream, franchises that moved one game each against Indiana last year, have currently scheduled zero. To attribute this reduction to a lack of fan interest is to ignore the incompetence that often permeates the upper layers of the league's hierarchy. The players' union often operates with a chaotic energy, a performance of buffoonery that complicates the labor landscape. But the WNBA leadership and ownership groups wear a different shade of performance paint. They are clowns of a different species. Consider the ownership of the Atlanta Dream or the Washington Mystics, led by figures such as Sheila Johnson. These are entities that should be driven by the cold logic of capitalism, yet they seem prone to decisions that defy economic survival. The Atlanta Dream plays in an arena that seats 4,300 people. It is a confined space, a bottleneck for revenue. To host the Indiana Fever in such an environment is to voluntarily cap the potential of the event. It is an act of financial suffocation. I would be shocked, genuinely shocked, if the Atlanta Dream and the Washington Mystics do not eventually announce venue changes for these games. The pressure of the market is a physical weight. Eventually, it crushes poor decision-making. The Connecticut Sun's hesitation likely stems from the internal instability of their franchise, a distraction that paralyzes strategic planning. But the bet remains that they, too, will ultimately move the games. Some may argue that the hesitation is rooted in the biological reality of the previous season, where Caitlin Clark was injured. There is a logic to this caution. If the asset is damaged, the value of the venue change decreases. But if she enters the season with her structural integrity restored, if she is healthy, the calculus changes immediately. We have seen this behavior before. The Liberty, the Portland Fire, the Mercury, the Golden State Valkyries, and the Lynx already inhabit NBA arenas. They understand the scale required. The decrease in moved Fever games comes after a season where Clark played in just 13 contests. She appeared in only 3 of the 9 games that were moved to larger venues. Yet, even with her absence, the Indiana Fever remained the league's most potent draw. The data is unequivocal. They averaged 15,884 fans for their road games, a figure that eclipsed the next closest team by 4,000 spectators. The road games that were moved to larger arenas were all sellouts. The seats were filled. However, one must distinguish between attendance and revenue. They are related but distinct metrics. When the realization hit the market that Clark would not be playing, the ticket prices on the secondary exchanges dropped. The gate revenue suffered. This is the nuanced reality. The crowd remained, but the frenzy, the willingness to pay a premium, subsided. It is a reminder that the Clark effect is not just about bodies and seats. It is about the valuation of the experience. A spokesperson for the Fever, when pressed on the matter, offered a statement that reflects the uncertainty of the ecosystem. We can't speak to what other teams may do in terms of venue changes. Yet, beneath the corporate neutrality, there is an expectation. I would be shocked, the sentiment goes, if these games do not get moved once a CBA is done and finalized. This brings us back to the element of time. The WNBA released the 2025 schedule 2 months earlier than historical precedents suggest. In the previous cycle, the Atlanta Dream announced their move to State Farm Arena, the home of the Hawks, in March. The Dallas Wings followed suit a week later. We are currently positioned at the end of January. There is a temporal gap of 6 weeks before we reach the historical trigger point for these decisions. To declare the phenomenon dead in January is to misread the calendar. I do not believe for a second that the Caitlin Clark effect has dissipated. The energy is merely dormant, waiting for a catalyst. I have communicated this to others within the content creation sphere. The moment she sinks her first three-pointer in an official game, the moment the ball leaves her hands and finds the net from the logo, the machine will restart. The inertia will be broken. The narrative of decline will be exposed as a fabrication. However, the audience requires visual confirmation. They want to see the subject in the Indiana Fever uniform, participating in the kinetic reality of the game. There is a lingering bitterness in the atmosphere, a residue from the way the previous season's injury was managed. The fans were kept in a state of suspended animation, strung along by an organization that failed to communicate the severity of the ankle injury. The media connected to the Fever acted with a strange aloofness, a southern detachment that alienated the observers. Reality must be acknowledged. This mishandling created a layer of scar tissue between the franchise and its supporters. But the biology of fandom is resilient. The moment she is in uniform, the moment the physical feats resume, all bets are off. The prediction stands. The Wings, the Dream, and likely others will move their games. The Chicago Sky, a team not scheduled to play the Fever as frequently this year, only 3 times, represents a lost opportunity for venue expansion, a victim of the schedule's geometry. The question remains, is the Caitlin Clark effect over? The evidence suggests otherwise. But one must not underestimate the capacity for human error within the leadership of the WNBA. It is not outside the realm of possibility for certain ownership groups, specifically the Dream or the Mystics, to act out of spite. There exists a potential scenario where they are willing to cost themselves significant revenue simply to deny the influence of a single player. In the study of this league, one often finds that competence is a scarce resource. There are not many sharp minds guiding the trajectory of women's basketball. The system is populated by those who struggle to navigate the basic requirements of the business. But the market is a relentless force, much like the jungle. It does not care for the egos of owners or the posturing of unions. It cares only for the product, for the spectacle, and for the undeniable draw of a generational talent. The silence of the current schedule is not an ending. It is a pause before the inevitable noise returns. We must consider the environment in which these decisions are being made. The WNBA is an ecosystem that has historically struggled for sunlight, competing vertically for attention in a crowded sports canopy. For decades, it existed in the twilight, relying on a small, dedicated base of support. The arrival of Caitlin Clark was akin to a lightning strike, a sudden, violent illumination of the landscape. It revealed the flaws in the architecture. It exposed the inadequacy of the 4,000-seat arenas. It placed a stress test on the league's logistical capabilities, a test which in many ways the leadership failed. The Caitlin Clark effect is not merely a marketing slogan. It is a quantifiable shift in the physics of the league. When a single object exerts enough mass to alter the orbit of every other object around it, that is not a trend. That is a fundamental change in the system. The media's attempt to declare this change obsolete is an attempt to return to the comfort of the twilight. They prefer the known quantity of the past to the volatile, demanding reality of the present. They want the story to be about the collective because the collective is safe. The collective does not require moving games to NBA arenas. The collective does not require negotiating with NBA owners for dates. The collective fits neatly into the existing infrastructure. But the audience has tasted the new reality. They have seen the sellouts. They have felt the electricity of a packed road game. To suggest that they will now be content with the old standard is to misunderstand human psychology. Once the boundaries of possibility have been expanded, they do not easily retract. The fans know that the Atlanta Dream playing in a small box is a choice, not a necessity. They know that the empty seats in a small arena are not a sign of intimacy, but a sign of exclusion. The upcoming season hangs in the balance, suspended between the potential for a lockout and the potential for a record-breaking year. The CBA is the key. Until that document is signed, until the labor peace is secured, the schedule will remain a conservative document, a hedge against disaster. The later dates for the big games are the league's insurance policy. They are betting that by August, the storm will have passed, the deal will be done, and the machinery of commerce can operate at full capacity. This is a story about competence. It is about the ability of a league to recognize a survival advantage when it is presented to them. In the Amazon, survival depends on recognizing resources, fresh water, shelter, the path of the river. In professional sports, survival depends on recognizing the source of revenue and attention. Caitlin Clark is the river. She is the path to the wider world. To ignore that path, to refuse to follow the water because of pride or administrative lethargy, is to choose a slow form of extinction. The owners of the Dream, the Mystics, and the Sun are currently standing on the bank of that river, refusing to build a boat. They are watching the water flow by, claiming that the current is not as strong as it used to be, claiming that the effect is over. It is a dangerous delusion. The current is as strong as ever. The only question is whether they will choose to navigate it or whether they will remain stranded on the shore, clutching their spreadsheets, wondering why the world has moved on without them. The Toronto Tempo and the Portland Fire understand the assignment. The expansion teams are moving, adapting, seeking out the audience in Montreal and Vancouver. They are behaving like organisms that want to grow. The legacy franchises, by contrast, appear calcified, trapped in the amber of their own habits. The narrative that the effect is a wrap is a comforting lie told by those who are threatened by the scale of the change. It is a way to minimize the anomaly, to reduce the girl who fell from the clouds back to the stature of a normal human. But anomalies do not revert to the mean simply because the media wishes them to. They persist. They force the system to adapt around them. When the season begins, assuming the labor disputes are resolved, the reality on the ground will assert itself. The ticket demands will overwhelm the small venues. The secondary market will react. The voices of the fans will become a roar that cannot be silenced by a press release. The owners will be forced to act, not out of vision, but out of necessity. They will move the games. They will open the doors. And they will claim that it was the plan all along. But we will know the truth. We will remember the hesitation. We will remember the January predictions of decline. We will remember the clown paint of the leadership. And we will watch as the Logo 3 flies through the air, indifferent to the doubts, landing with the certainty of gravity. The story of this season is not about a decline in interest. It is about a delay in execution. It is about a league struggling to metabolize its own success. It is a survival story, not of a person in the jungle, but of a business trying to survive its own incompetence. The Caitlin Clark effect is the test. The schedule is the first failure. But the final grade has not yet been posted. If this analysis of the structural failures and potential of the WNBA resonates with you, if you prefer the cold clarity of facts over the comfortable narratives of the media, consider supporting the channel. Like the video, ensure you are still subscribed, and join us as we continue to document the evolution of this ecosystem. The jungle is loud, and it is easy to lose your way. We aim to provide a map. Peace. I'm out. Till next time.